Welcome to the Spirituality What? Podcast, where we explore the mysteries, joys, and challenges of being spiritual beings navigating our unpredictable human experience we call life here on planet Earth. I'm your friendly guide, Rebecca, ready to jump into our adventure of the day. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Spirituality What? Podcast. This is Rebecca. I am your guide in this adventure today. Before we get started, just a quick plug. It's that time of year, that gifting time of year. And if you haven't checked out the merch already, you totally should. If you head over to my website, www.spiritualitywhat.com, there's a link at the top of the page that will take you directly to the merch site. Lots of cool stuff, mugs and shirts and journals and luggage tags, all kinds of cool things. If you like something but you want it in a different color or you're thinking something different, please don't hesitate to DM me or reach out over email and we can kind of discuss those things. Today we are going to jump into a new episode with Jeff, Yielding as Spiritual Beings. And Jeff, I got in contact with through podcastguest.com. I've told you all about that website. Not sponsored by the website or anything, but it is a really great place to get information about people that are interested in taking part of your podcast. And Jeff is from Portland. He's got over 36 years of experience practicing and teaching the meditative and martial arts. He's the founder of the Northwest Fighting Arts Portland Tai Chi Academy and the Yielding Warrior, where he emphasizes the transformative power of meditative and martial art practices, particularly this concept of yielding. He's published a couple of books and has hundreds of instructional videos and an online program and has worked with thousands of students all over the world. And today, Jeff and I are going to talk a little bit about Tai Chi and Qigong. We get into the 5 parts of the meditative practice, which from his perspective are athletic, therapeutic, medical, philosophical, and spiritual. We talk also about the 5 regulations, which are the body, the breath, the mind, the energy, and if you're into it, the spirit. We also talk about the science of the breath, and we get into some details about the yin and the yang breaths, and we go into a little bit of a discussion around developing the habit of getting out of distraction into focus. And he even gives us a little bit of insight into his 3 pillars of meditation. So with that, we are going to jump right in. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Spirituality What? Podcast. I am here with Jeff. And Jeff, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Jeff Patterson. I'm over here in Portland, Oregon. I've been running a meditation center and martial arts academy here for over 30 years and have had the good fortune to have over 26,000 students come through the academy, which has led to many amazing stories about how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's kind of been my main driver and energy in creating my online meditation program and writing my last couple books and really just kind of given meaning to my work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff. And we have actually done a podcast specifically on meditation as spiritual beings. But today we are going to talk a little bit more specifically about the unique method that Jeff has developed and get some kind of other things. We've also done martial arts, not kind of at a high level, but we had an episode about jujitsu. But before we get into all of that, I am going to ask you the same question that I ask all of the interviewees on this podcast, which is, what does spirituality mean to you?
Spirituality is about staying connected to who we really are. You know, it's so common today in today's society that we get used to putting up these barriers and wearing masks and trying to protect other people or ourselves and not really show how we really feel. Maybe we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or maybe we just want to not show somebody something that's bothering us. And we get so caught up into living this way and with all of these distractions that oftentimes we look at ourselves in the mirror and we're still wearing these masks. And I think a spiritual person knows how to let these barriers down and these masks down and just stay connected to who we truly are.
Awesome. I love that. And there is a consistent theme this year throughout. The word connect and connection and connected comes up a lot when we're talking about spirituality. So, okay, let's jump into the topic for today. So, you said in your introduction that you have been doing this martial arts kind of meditation studio practice for 30 years. So, can you describe what got you into martial arts, how you got to meditation, and then maybe kind of like why you combined them?
Yeah, I've always wanted to do martial arts as a kid, but I came up in a low income single family or single parent family, and we didn't have the resources to do anything like that. And so when I was in my teens, I got a job and I started making a little bit of money, and I was able to start taking martial arts. And that was my first introduction to that. And something about it just kind of stuck, and I always stayed interested. And that led to getting into boxing and a few other martial arts. And after studying for about 4 or 5 years, I was training at a boxing club here in Portland, Oregon. And at a boxing club, if you're not familiar with it, it's not run like a traditional fitness style class where you come in and there's a teacher and all the students follow along with the teacher. There's usually a handful of coaches, and each one of those coaches might have 3, 4, or 5 different fighters that they're working with. Well, at this one particular gym, there was one of the coaches there who was a very well known coach. I really wanted to get to spend some time with him. And so I would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and try to get him to notice me. I'd work real hard and let him know that I wanted to train with him. And after following him around for about 3 or 4 months, he finally started giving me some helping me out a little bit. And it was only about 2 or 3 weeks of getting to work with him when he said something to me that changed my life forever. In that he told me if I really wanted to be a good boxer, I should start doing Tai Chi and meditation. Now, at the time, I was this 19-year-old kid thinking, Tai Chi, isn't that for like old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? And I had a lot of respect for him, though, and I listened to what he said, and it's changed my life in so many ways. And through the years running this academy here for 30 years, I've had thousands of students coming through the academy, and I've literally heard hundreds of stories of how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's how I got introduced to the meditative arts.
Nice. So, what is Tai Chi exactly? Because I'm with you. It's just a bunch of people moving around in a park.
So yeah, so when I refer to the meditative arts, I'm including things like Tai Chi, Qigong, sitting meditation, standing meditation, breath work. Tai Chi was originally created as a martial art, and people used to practice it to train the armies, and to work towards defending their villages. And what happened is this guy came from India. His name was Buddha Dhammo, and he realized that a lot of these people that were practicing this martial art were broken and had a lot of injuries. And so he taught them how to integrate the healing side of the practice, which is where the Qigong comes from. And nowadays, people that practice Tai Chi, and I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say this, is that I bet 95 to maybe even 98% of the schools around the United States that practice Tai Chi don't even a halfway good understanding of what the martial side of Tai Chi is all about. Most people just practice
Mm.
for the health benefits. And there's amazing health benefits, and there's been hundreds of studies by very reputable sources that have proven that Tai Chi is good for multiple different things.
Like what?
A lot of elderly patients practice Tai Chi because it's great for flexibility and strength and balance control and
Mm,
being stable. It's good to expand our breathing capacity and learn how to use more of our lung capacity. It's good for cognition. It's good for teaching us how to deal with stress elements, with anxiety, with panic attacks. It's good for athletes to learn how to improve their performance on the field. I mean, there's just really so many different directions you can take the practice.
that's really cool. Okay, so just to make sure I've understood, when we talk about when you're saying Tai Chi and Qigong, they kind of go together then.
They do in many ways. However, you could practice Qigong and not do Tai Chi, but most people who practice Tai Chi have Qigong integrated with it.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay. This is as familiar as I am with both of those things. So I appreciate the additional context. And what I'm hearing is the combination of those two things is like a whole body and a whole mind exercise.
Yeah, so when I talk about the meditative arts, there's really five different paths that you can follow with a meditation practice. So there's kind of the what I call the athletic side of the practice where people practice to improve their performance, their timing, their precision, their awareness, their sensitivity, all these things that help make them a better athlete. Then there's the therapeutic side of the practice, which is good for uh, flexibility and strength and dealing with injuries. Then there's the medical side of the practice, which all of Chinese medicine is based off of Qigong theory. And so it's been around for generations, and this is a very deep well to jump into. And then there's the philosophical side of the practice, which again is a very deep subject in many ways that we can apply these different philosophies on virtue and thoughts and strategy. And then lastly, there's the spiritual side of the practice, which is what most people think of when they talk about the meditative arts. And so, as somebody coming to the meditative arts, they could follow any one of these paths or a combination of these paths when they're starting to learn how to build a practice around the meditative arts.
And how does a gateway into the meditative arts from a this sport perspective maybe or a medical perspective change what you're actually doing when you meditate? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the foundational principles in any direction you choose to follow are all the same. You know,
Mm,
I talk a lot about the five regulations. And in the five regulations, these are fundamental principles that will benefit any meditation practitioner, whether they're doing a sitting meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, standing meditation, any meditative practice. You need to cultivate these five different areas. And they are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And briefly, I'll kind of touch on what all of those mean.
beautiful.
So,
Yeah.
regulating the body is usually where we begin, and it's the easiest one to develop and cultivate. And basically, it's dealing with our skeletal alignment and our muscular tension in the body and learning how to control that in all of our day to day activities. And an example of that and how it affects us would be think about a time maybe you're sitting down at a computer for 3 or 4 hours and you start feeling drained and maybe your shoulders are rounded forward and maybe your neck's getting sore and you're just feeling very lethargic. And then another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you feel energized and you feel like you're on top of the world. Well, we're 100% in control of these two different energies and how they affect us all day, every day. And so by learning how to regulate the body, we can control these things. And what I usually ask people is, how much of the day do you spend drained and why? Because you're in control of that. And if you want to
Mm,
change that, that is the easiest regulation to integrate into your day. Then the second regulation is regulating the breath. And this is a lot deeper subject. And this is something that you will, if you jump into the meditative arts, will be studying for the rest of your life. And in Qigong, they often refer to the definition of Qigong as the science of the breath, because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies. And because of this, we kind of broadly categorize them into yin methods and yang methods. Yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of breathing meditations. And what I mean by yin breath is, if you've ever listened to somebody sleep, you'll notice that their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so, if we want to emulate that style of energy in our meditations, we can lengthen the inhales, soft retentions at the end of the inhale, and shorter exhales to help bring that energy inward. And this is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, panic attacks. It's good for boosting our creativity. There's a lot of benefits that come from this side of the practice. Then we have the yang side of the practice. And the yang side of the practice is more aggressive. It's kind of like if you've ever had to push your car or you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is using your exhale, putting tension in the breath, maybe even making it audible. And this helps generate energy and power. Another example of these two scenarios would be if you can imagine a time when you cried or you watch somebody crying, they naturally they breathe in a lot more than they're exhaling and longer than they're exhaling. And this brings that energy inward. And that's why a lot of times when people cry a lot and that leads to depression, and that depression leads to sickness, because that yin style of breath weakens the immune system. So while it does have some strengths and some very beneficial tools to it, you don't want to do a lot of aggressive style yin work like crying, because it will eventually lead to sickness. And then another example of the yang breath would be ha 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 ha. When you're laughing or you're thinking about belly breathing, you notice how if you go into a laughing fit, you'll start sweating and getting hot. This is an example of our energy expanding. And when we start learning how to use the breath as a strategy, and in Chinese philosophy, they call this balancing the kan and li, or the water and fire. Now we have the tools to regulate our physical, mental, and emotional outcomes just with the breath. And most people go through the day with emotional ups and downs. Some people are like a roller coaster, others maybe a little more balanced. But when you start recognizing these imbalances, and say you start noticing that you're getting a little bit excited, you can use the yin breath to help bring you back down. And when you start feeling depleted, we can use the yang breath to help bring us back up. And now, this idea of learning how to use the breath as a strategy can help us find more balance and regulation throughout the day, changing our energetic states. Then we have regulating the mind. And regulating the mind, like the breath, is a lifelong practice. And, one of the most common things I'll hear people say is, I've tried meditation before, but it just didn't work for me. I couldn't quiet my mind.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Somewhere along the way, people got this misconception or got misled thinking that in order to be good at meditation, you have to be in this blissful place of nirvana that nothing bothers you. And, I've been fortunate enough in my career to travel around the world many times and train with some amazing meditation practitioners. And I have never once met anybody that doesn't get distracted. It's part of being human. We all,
Yeah.
and once we can learn to make that shift and realize that that's not a bad thing, and actually think that it's a good thing because we're recognizing it and now we have the tools to deal with it. So, for example, if I'm meditating for 20 minutes and I'm doing a sitting practice or a movement practice, and I get distracted 50 times during that session, and every time I get distracted, I recognize the distraction, I use my posture, my breath, my movement to help bring me back to center. I just got 50 repetitions on being out of balance and coming back to center. And now, if I do that every day, every month, every year, I start developing this strength and this power to come out of any kind of distraction and be very focused in what I'm doing. And this is a really powerful skill to develop. There's this story that I enjoy about these two older monks. and they're walking down this dirt road after a big rainstorm, and everything's muddy. There's puddles everywhere, and they come up against to this huge mud puddle. And on the other side of the puddle is this beautiful little girl standing there in a white dress, and she's crying. And the older monk yells across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we do anything to help?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." And so the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs, he walks across the puddle, picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, and finally the younger monk is just furious, and he says, "You know we're not supposed to touch girls, but yet you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down at him and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we have to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we finally let something go? And so this idea of learning how to regulate the mind is very valuable and an important lesson in the practice. Then there's regulating the energy. And regulating the energy is a very deep concept and something that we could literally talk for hours about. But briefly, I'll describe what I'm talking about here. And once you've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, you have the tools and the ability now to lead the energy in the body. And sometimes we'll lead that energy inward, sometimes we'll extend it outward, and sometimes we'll circulate it in the body to get different outcomes with our meditative practice. And this is kind of the basic understanding of it. Then the last regulation is regulating the spirit. And this is a very profound idea, and it's something that monks and meditation practitioners will spend their entire life working towards that idea of enlightenment. But as you can see by these 5 fundamental principles, that when we start integrating these ideas into our practice and into our life, there is nothing that can't be helped by doing this practice and influenced positively by integrating meditation into your life.
Yes, that was awesome. A lot to unpack there. So I did take a couple of notes. I think I really I like the use of the word regulating them, especially when we talk about the mind. I'm really drawn to that terminology because I feel like it helps describe exactly what you were saying, which is not that you shouldn't not have any thoughts, and it's more like graceful, like that's what you're just working on, sort of regulating the thoughts, like getting the thoughts out of you, saying, okay, cool, I had a thought, thank you, go away now, I'm going to do this other thing. So I really like using that word. My other sort of thought that I kind of came to, so you were talking about, when you're talking about the body, we, with this regulation, we can be 100% in control. And then with the breath of like kind of where we're feeling and what we're doing and how we're, with our body. And I was wondering, when you say control, do you mean like are you talking about like a conscious control, or are you talking more about presence?
Yeah, so I think I understand the question, and let me see if I can answer it here for you. So, I this is an important concept for people to understand when they talk about the regulations, because the ultimate goal, at first, you need to be conscious, you need to think about it, you need to try to spend some energy there and really make it a habit. But the ultimate goal is that we regulate to the point of no regulation. And when we can
Mm.
do that, now we just naturally hold that posture, and we don't have to think about our muscular tension because it's just the way we live. And the meditative arts isn't meant to be a hobby that we do once in a while. It's meant to be a way of life. And it kind of it takes away from the idea of the practice if you sit and meditate for an hour or do an hour of Tai Chi and you feel peaceful and relaxed. And then the whole rest of the day, you're stressed out and you're angry and you're worrying about this and that and the other. And so, learning how to integrate these
Mm.
practices into everything you do is part of the lifestyle.
Absolutely. I love that word, integration. If you have a barrier between like your practice and then not applying that to the rest of your life, it's like the meditation is the safe space away from the rest of life, right? Like you're not having to run errands and things like that, where you can hone the skills such that you can then use them in the chaos and in the crazy other parts of your life. I really like that. I think in your book you also talk about ritual and active methods of meditation. Is that something you can expand on a little bit?
Yeah, so I call them the three pillars of meditation. So there's ritual, active, and philosophical. And ritual is when you set time aside every day, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever that is for you, and you do your meditation practice. And it's kind of the core fundamental, like bread and butter of any meditation work that you do. And the Dalai Lama once said that everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. And I love that saying, in that, it's so important to just have some time where we can put the cell phones down, take the earphones off, shut off the screens, and just connect to who we are. And that brings up another little sidetrack here. A lot of people, when they think they're meditating, they're watching a video or they're listening to an audio program or doing this app. And while all of those sources I think are good to help you learn something, the meditative arts are often referred to as the internal arts for a reason, and that it's meant to be time in this ritual session where we turn our focus inward. We're not watching a video, we're not listening to an audio program. We're using that time to stay connected and really listen to what's going on internally. And that's what's going to help you really get to a deep level of practice, not watching a video or listening to an audio. And while it may sound like I'm a little negative towards that, I'm not at all. In fact, we have an online program that's all videos, and so I'm not trying to steer you away from that as a learning source. And it's a great source to kind of help you understand what to do, but just don't use it as a crutch and think it's something that is going to make your ritual practices get to deep levels. Then we have active practices, and active practices are great because they're things that we can do to integrate into all of our day-to-day activities. And they can be done in as little as 60 seconds or 2 or 3 minutes. And they could be as simple as, just counting out 10 breaths, or maybe doing some spinal rotations or a simple movement practice. And integrating these will help us start to make our day part of a meditation journey, and just something that we do everywhere, every day. And that's where you really start to see the true gold of what this practice has to offer, is that now it just starts to become who you are. And you stop thinking about meditation as a chore you got to do, but you look at it like, this is something I get to do. It makes me feel good. I get all these benefits from it. I'm so lucky to have this in my life. And when you can make that adjustment, that's where you really start to see so many benefits from the practice. And then lastly, we have our philosophical practices, and these can be integrated in either the active or the ritual methods that we're using.
I love that. Okay, couple of things. So you mentioned in this little tangent about the audio files and the video files, and I'm 100% with you. I love that all of those resources exist as tools to help you figure out what's actually working for you and what you like and what you don't like, and all the different sort of things that are out there. But I'm wondering, is what you're saying that meditation in silence is really good for us?
Yes, so it's time for you to turn inward and just kind of listen to yourself. Part of, when you, for example, when you're doing a Tai Chi form, you'll learn, say, a movement that has 4 counts to it. You move the hand, you pick up the arms, you set the arms down, and you step the foot. So you could look at it very broken and mechanically like that. But in reality, there's a million things going on. You're shifting the weight. There's tension throughout the leg and the torso. You're twisting your obliques. Your breath is inhaling and exhaling. You're moving your shoulder girdle and moving your hand and spreading your fingers, and your intent is focused on one specific place. And all of these things that are going on, there's literally millions of things going on. And if we're watching a video, how many of those things do you think we're noticing? not many.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
None.
so
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so we really want to start to see all the beauty in the movement. It's kind of like for you musicians out there, it's like you can teach somebody to play a D chord in the first day, but give that to somebody who's learned it the first day and somebody who's been playing for 30 years, and the person who's been playing for 30 years can make it seem like magic, and it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
In the Tai Chi or these movement meditative arts is the same idea. We want to learn how to play music and really let our soul kind of come out in the practice, and that's where we really make those deep connections. And you can't do that when you're listening to an audio
Yeah.
or watching a
When
video.
you've got, yeah. And that is it for today. Part 1 of our 2-part episode. Part 2 comes out next Wednesday, and we will see you then. Thank you for joining me on today's Spirituality What? Adventure. Subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. Visit us on Instagram at spirituality.what to interact, tell us what spirituality means to you, and even provide some of your own personal musings. Human on, you phenomenal spiritual beings.